Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Blackstar Canyon. Blackstar Canyon is a real place in Orange County, California. Many people believe it to be inhabited by a malevolent entity. Some call it the demon of Blackstar. I'm 26 now, so this was some time ago. At age 14, I was invited by my high school buddy, Bobby, to hang out with him and babysit his 5-year-old brother, Alex, in their fabulously appointed mansion. Their house was very old, but had a new intercom system so the parents could locate/yell at the kids from anywhere in the house. My dad dropped me off right as Bobby's parents were leaving. We were already up in his room playing PlayStation when the speaker in his room crackled to life. "Okay, we're leaving, guys. We ordered a pizza for you. It'll be here in half an hour." Then I caught a glimpse of their car leaving the driveway. Not even 5 minutes later, the intercom starts popping and static fuzzing, and a really soft, barely audible woman's voice comes on. "We love you, Alex. We love you. We all do." There was a lot of feedback and interruption, but this is what I made out from it. Then in a much clearer normal transmission, Alex responds, "Who are you, Mama?" This freaked us out a lot, and we ran and grabbed Alex out of the upstairs bonus room where he was watching a movie. We searched the entire house, finding no one, of course, and Alex explained. "It was probably the cold people. They come in at night where it's warm." When the pizza guy made the delivery, Alex kept laughing hysterically, and we kept asking, "What's so funny?" He refused to tell us. A few hours later, we were watching a movie, and Alex again broke into hysterical laughter, saying, I know, to himself. Bobby yelled at Alex, "What is your problem?" And Alex responded, while laughing and laying on his back on the carpet, "Pizza boy gonna die. Pizza boy gonna die." Around 9 p.m., we put Alex to bed and went onto the balcony to smoke weed. The balcony overlooked the canyon, which was very dark. The moon lit everything up just a little bit, and as we stood there, we heard this terrible, terrible scream. It was a scream of an animal, not a person. It was the sound of an animal, maybe getting killed by another animal, something like that, but much louder, a longer shriek that echoed through the entire canyon. It was sad and frightening at the same time and deeply disturbed me. At this point, I realized I'd smoked too much and went into Bobby's room to lay down on my sleeping bag. Bobby was using the PlayStation on his bed while I tried to calm down on my sleeping bag, but my head was spinning and all the creepy things that had occurred tonight were starting to add up. I was way too stoned, and I kept getting this nagging idea that there was something in Bobby's closet, which was about 2 yards away from my feet. For about 15 minutes, I just sat there, thinking of all the different kinds of horrible things that could be inside it, trying to imagine what the cold people looked like. Finally, I jumped up and yanked the door open. It was a walk-in closet with all kinds of clothes, a snowboard, and other crap a rich kid would have. There was a stuffed animal dolphin from SeaWorld sitting on the ground, which I knew belonged to Alex, so I picked it up and walked down the hall to his room to return it. Do you ever get that flash of dizziness from entering a closet or a room? I don't know if it's a smell or the stale air or what, but sometimes I get this feeling like I need to get out of there quick, and that's how I felt in that closet. I reasoned it was the weed. Alex was awake on the top bunk of his bunk bed. I gave him a stuffed animal and he thanked me. Then he asked, "Where's my water?" I replied, "I don't know. Do you want some?" He sat up in bed and said, "I asked Mom for some, but she just stared at me and walked out." This rattled me a lot. I told him to sit tight for a minute. Then I went and I got Bobby and we walked downstairs to the garage to see if his parents had gotten home yet. They had not, and all the doors were locked. And the expensive alarm system was armed. We went back up and interrogated Alex, and he said, "I woke up and she was just standing at the doorway looking at me. I asked her for water and she turned around and left. I thought she went to Bobby's room." We brought Alex into Bobby's room and set up a sleeping bag for him next to mine, so we'd all be together. Then we called their parents' cell phone, but they didn't answer. Then the doorbell rang. It was the community security guards who worked at the front gate and patrolled the neighborhoods. They told us that Bobby's next-door neighbor, Mrs. Schwartz, was watching TV in her living room when she noticed the woman standing at the glass door to her patio, staring in at her, watching her. She screamed and called 911, but after a sweep of the premises, they found no one. The guards wanted to know if we'd seen or heard anyone. We said no, and they promised us they'd look around the property and sweep the neighborhood every hour. We went to bed. I was so out of it from fear and exhaustion that I just wanted to hide under some blankets. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. I lifted my head off the pillow and looked around the room. The moonlight seeped in through the window just enough to light up Alex, who was standing at the intercom. A voice was whispering from inside it, but I couldn't make out any of the words. He pressed the button and said, "I can't. They don't want me to go downstairs." I jumped up and shook Bobby awake and shouted, "What the fuck are you doing, Alex?" He was obviously startled and replied, "She wants me to let her in. Bobby, she says she's freezing." Bobby grabbed Alex and pulled him away from the intercom, then pressed the button and said, "Who the fuck are you?" After a few seconds, there was just a hissing, popping, staticky noise, then nothing. I asked Bobby if there was an intercom outside the house, and he said no. There were 2 intercoms downstairs and 4 upstairs, so whoever was using it was already inside the house. We called the security guards, who checked the entire house and disabled the intercom for us. They said it was probably malfunctioning and picking up signals from a nearby house with the same system. We went back to sleep, and this time I slept against the wall beneath the intercom, so Alex would literally have to step on me to use the intercom. At about 3 a.m., we all jumped awake to deafening, terrifying screams. I was so shocked that it took me a second to realize that it wasn't Bobby or Alex screaming. It was someone else. Someone inside the bedroom with us. The lights flicked on, illuminating the entire room in blinding white. I first noticed Bobby, who had turned on the lights. Then I saw a woman standing there in the doorway, completely silent, her eyes wide open. It was Bobby's mom, Carrie. She didn't move or make a sound for a few seconds. Bobby said, "Mom?" And then she lifted her hand slowly, pointed at the closet door, and resumed screaming uncontrollably. Her screams were so loud I actually thought I was going to have a heart attack. I have never been so afraid. Then a huge lumbering form came barreling down the hallway towards Bobby's room. It was Bobby's father, Ben. Both Bobby and his dad grabbed Carrie and gently guided her out of the room, calling her name. Ben apologized to me over and over, saying that his wife suffered from night terrors and that it was actually somewhat common for her to have fits of screaming or sleepwalking. After about 10 minutes, everything had calmed down, and Carrie was awake. She returned to apologize to me and to calm Alex down, who was actually handling the situation quite maturely for a 5-year-old. He asked her, "Why were you looking at me in my room?" And she said, "Mommy wasn't home, sweetie. You must have had a dream." We opened the closet again just to be sure, and found nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't finish out the night at Bobby's house. My father came and picked me up before sunrise. The Monster of Black Road. The demon of Grandbrier is an unsubstantiated poltergeist or cryptid. It is known for the abject terror it inspires in all surviving victims. The monster was first reported to haunt Black Road, a hiking destination that was closed in 1978 due to all the disappearances or mutilations of 11 people over the course of 5 years. It has been sighted throughout Central California since, and has been purportedly a resident of the forest of the Sierra and Santa Cruz Mountains. No photographs of the demon exist. There are alleged recordings of its voice to be found online. The demon has been known to appear in human form as a tall, gangly adult male who refers to himself as Mr. Friend. His modus operandi is to appear on roadsides as a hitchhiker or pedestrian in need of assistance from drivers. When picked up or approached, Mr. Friend gains the person's trust through subliminal coercion and amicable conversation. His objective is to get the person in a position alone with him, whether in their own home or in the woods, where he can infiltrate their minds. Mr. Friend is identifiable due to the apparent double-jointedness of his neck, which allows him to crane his head in disturbing and violent angles. He reportedly does not blink. The most vivid account of an encounter with the demon of Grandbrier comes from David Alvaro Espinosa of Richmond, California. David and his fiancée were camping in the Sierra Nevada region of California in July of 1999. From dusk until approximately 1 a.m., the couple overheard frightening shrieks from an injured animal or person in the woods. David went to investigate and spotted an elk with a large sharp object stuck in its side. It evaded him for several minutes as he attempted to get close enough to help the animal. After a half-mile of following the screaming elk, it collapsed onto the ground and died. As David approached it, he noticed the eyes had been removed. A hiker called out to him further up in the woods, apparently lost, and David searched for the person until he located a lone man. Introducing himself as Mr. Friend, the man claimed he had been lost from his camp for several hours after hearing crying in the woods. David agreed to help Mr. Friend find his camp in exchange for a promise of water and a lantern. After a while, the two came upon a shack in the forest with no windows. David felt frightened and repulsed immediately and tried to leave, but Mr. Friend violently dragged him inside. David claims to have been held in place on the floor by an otherworldly force, as Mr. Friend began licking the door and walls while muttering to himself. David asked who the man was and what he wanted. He responded, "I am the surgeon of your soul, a voyager of the dream, an explorer of the furthest reaches of experience, a demon to some, angel to others." When David begged to be released, the demon responded, "But you must see distant worlds of the unfathomed." As Mr. Friend advanced on David, he reached into his shirt and retrieved a crucifix, which immediately infuriated and altered Mr. Friend's appearance. According to David, the cross did not deter the monster, but appeared to cause it significant pain and force it to reveal its true form. In psychological analysis, David outright refused to give a description of the demon's real appearance. David claims the demon ripped the crucifix out of his hand and swallowed it. It kneeled down and offered to make a deal with David, stating that if the man retrieved his cross, he could go free. Then the monster opened its mouth wide and crouched over David's body. David claims he slowly reached down the monster's throat, careful not to scrape his arm on the sharp rotted teeth, as it made gagging and gurgling sounds. Deep inside of the gut of the demon, a human hand was growing. It clutched the cross and reluctantly relinquished it to David, then grabbed his own hand and squeezed hard. David claims that while the hand clutched him, he envisioned the monster torturing him for eternity in that shack, under permanent night sky with only red stars. David withdrew his arm quickly and ran screaming from the shack, returning to the dark forest. The crucifix had melted and warped significantly. The last memory David recalls of the demon was seeing it standing outside of the shack, dragging its fingernails up and down the walls, hypnotized and stammering in Latin. In 2009, 10 years after the incident, David's body was found mutilated in the woods outside of his home in Capitola, California. The wounds were self-inflicted. He left a note for his wife which read, "He has visited me again. I thought I had gone to the limits. I hadn't. Geptre gave me an experience beyond limits, an entire reality hidden from our eyes where pain and pleasure are indivisible, where we and our fears are one. I have witnessed the birth of negative galaxies. Pain is the keyhole through which we peer. I now belong to him. David." A hitchhiker named Mr. Friend has been reported to have been picked up by motorists in Santa Cruz, California, on 3 separate occasions, all which culminated in the drivers frantically calling the police after dropping him off, claiming a man needed serious medical attention for grotesque internal injury to the neck. In 2010, 2 students at the university in the same city have reported being met in the woods by a hiker by the name of Mr. Friend. He attempted to coax them into the deeper parts of the forest. A student claimed she heard the person reciting in Latin, "O my sweet Satan, the one whose path makes me sad, whose power is Satan." There was a little shed out in the woods where he made us suffer. Satan, Satan, Satan. This is allegedly also a hidden lyric from Led Zeppelin. Whether they have any relation, I do not know. Infinite Nightmare. Can I speak with you a moment? What the fuck are you doing in my bathroom? Upon exiting the shower, I was startled by a balding man of slight build standing in the center of my bathroom. It would seem more believable if I told you I was terrified, but the bizarre nature of this encounter felt so surreal that my knee-jerk reaction was to simply be startled. Don't worry, though. Fear set in after the initial shock. There was a strange man in my bathroom. Well, like I said, I would like to speak with you. He didn't seem threatening. Honestly, he looked nervous and spoke quickly. His eye contact was poor, and he spent more time staring at his hands, which were calloused and small. All right, he was also completely naked, void of genitals, but he was naked. The way he stood, with a slight hunch, one could easily notice every single vertebrae in his back, pushing against the skin. His bones tried to escape. They failed and instead morphed into this pathetic creature in my bathroom. After surveying this oddity of a human, for a few more seconds the fear melted away again. I was simply confused. So I wrapped a towel around myself and prodded for answers. What would you like to speak about? The dead-eyed god. While speaking this phrase, he made eye contact. He seemed confident now, but his frame betrayed him. I don't know what that is. I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what that was. Exactly why we're going to speak about it. Come. The Impish Thing beckoned to me with an undersized pointer finger. He opened my bathroom door and walked into the bedroom. As I followed, he slammed the door shut in my face. So, I've read stories. I've seen horror movies. If anything, this is the part where the door is locked from the outside. I'm trapped. The lights flicker. Something, I die. Naturally, I grabbed at the door handle. The cool metal, coated in the condensation from my shower, turns with my hand as I try to open the door. It isn't locked. This raises more questions that are quickly answered when I step, not into my bedroom, but into a vast stone hall of some ancient, forgotten temple. This hall is darkened, save for the spotlight from nowhere. It's shining only on me. I can tell its immense size from each echoing footstep I take. I'm alone here. The strange little man has disappeared. I'm also clothed in a black toga. This entire situation is one magnificent non sequitur. As I muse on my current predicament, I notice I'm not afraid. There is no terror, only emptiness. In the vastness of this stone hall, I feel exceedingly lonely. Each step I take spirals me deeper into a depression I have never felt. I've been low before, but with every trudging step, negative emotions rise in the mind, cascading like waves of hate and hurt. I'm buried in tragedies that I'm only imagining. After walking endlessly for what seemed like hours, I approached the door. The door was not in a frame. It was in the middle of the hall. It was my bathroom door. And I concluded that I circled this nightmarish realm, even though I never stopped walking forward. Was I in a fucking cartoon? Then the lights came on in the hall. Lights from nowhere. Lights so bright that I had to shield the arm I was using to shield my eyes. But as abruptly as the lights came on, they turned back off. Save for the spotlight, I was again the star of empty fucking death. There was something in the light. There was an end to the hall that only materialized in the light. That end, and I'm not sure how I noticed this during such a quick flash, but that end was a wall of ornately carved gold. A solid gold wall, carved in symbols I had never seen before. But again the wall, there was a throne. The throne was enormous. It housed a gargantuan beast. The beast, from what I recalled during the flash, was covered in white scales. An uncountable amount of giant, leathery wings were fully extended from the monster's back. The 6 arms and 2 massive legs bulged with muscle, and each limb was lined with crooked horns. Each spike held an impaled skull of some sort, human, animal, and otherwise. The face was the part I remember most vividly. It appeared as a reptilian lion, with the mane made of molten lead. The eyes were dark, vanquishing the light from the room, and I realized that the lights only turned on because the king closed his eyes. I said, "I need to speak with you," a voice from the darkness. It was not loud, and it felt comforting and chilling simultaneously. "I am the dead-eyed god. I reside here, in my temple at the edge of your sanity, worshipped by scores of wicked beings." The edge of my sanity? My voice was faint. The infinite depression beat me down to a level of sadness I didn't think was possible. The edge of all sanity. Any being descending into depression and darkness enters into my domain. But I was fine. We shall see. The lights came on and the dead-eyed god stood, eyes closed. Each step the mammoth deity took shook the temple. I was rooted in place, my heart racing as this building of a beast strode towards me. The gap was closed in seconds. Then came the wailing, moaning of thousands of ancient souls, each soul suffering more than the last. I clawed at my ears, trying to make the wailing stop. I laid on the cold stone in the fetal position, staring in wide-eyed horror at the towering god before me. "Twist your soul for me." The god, in an instant, shrunk to my size and knelt beside me. He turned back into the imp, but this time something had changed. With eyes still closed, the jaw of the imp man unhinged, engulfing my legs. I attempted to kick, but the fit was too tight. I clawed at the ground, trying to pull myself forward. The infinite depression sapped me of my energy. Hours of walking in darkness, pitying myself for trivial things. This was the fate of a darkened man. As the imp's mouth engulfed me, the bleak shadow was all I saw. I lost consciousness. The house was shaking. My house was definitely shaking. Then it stopped. I woke up outside on my stone patio. A hose was wrapped around my legs. My house wasn't shaking at all. I was shivering in the November cold. Blood dribbled from a fat lip. I touched my left cheek and winced. It was quiet out here. I'm not entirely sure how I got outside, but honestly, after that nightmare, I would have been fine to wake up in the bottom of an outhouse hole. Okay, maybe not, but most places seem better than the Hall of the Dead-Eyed God. It's been an hour since I've gathered myself from the patio. Showered, nothing strange. Dressed in my bedroom, nothing strange. Driving, nothing strange until I hit traffic. After everyone ahead takes their turn rubbernecking, the accident causing the stop, I decide to add to the slowdown and have a look as well. The cops surround one car. The car is fine, but a man inside lays face down on the dash. The passenger window is shattered and blood lines in the windshield. One of the officers holds a gun in an evidence bag. I know the witness he's talking to. That impish slight frame, the dead-eyed god not solemnly. I consider Prozac, but I know that would only be temporary. I'm stronger than that. I refuse to wail in that hall. At a distance. He's been around so long, I can barely remember life without him. But the first time, I will always remember the first time he showed up. I was 11 years old, having fun at Owen's birthday party. There was a bounce house in the yard, piñata, giant cake, clowns, a whole big shebang, since he was turning 13. We were gathered in the yard and he was opening his presents, and I had run off to use the bathroom, being as quick as I could. In this time, Owen's little sister, who was only 4, had fallen down and gotten hurt. It was serious, nothing broken, just a couple of scrapes and a fountain of tears. For some reason, most of the people there, adults and children alike, thought I'd pushed her down while I was gone. She started crying from near the house, and I'd recently gone inside, so they figured that was all the evidence needed. Much as I tried to convince them that I hadn't done anything to her, nearly no one believed me, including Owen. We argued, we fought, he shouted at me to leave, and that our friendship was over. I doubt I'd ever been so upset before. Which was the problem, I gather. On my way home, blood in my nose, tears in my eyes, and a ball of anger and hurt in my chest, I spotted him, standing on the corner at the end of the block, leaning around a light pole, staring at me. Was a person? Just staring. There was really nothing remarkable about him. Short hair, large eyes, and a generic racially ambiguous face. Rather androgynous as well. In fact, I only say he by default because the clothes he was wearing seemed to be typically masculine. A thin jacket and loose-fitting pants, all black of course. I saw him again when I stepped into my yard, half hidden behind the car at the end of my street. Still just staring at me, I screamed at him to go away. I didn't want to deal with some creepy jerk. I stormed past my parents, ignoring their questions. They knew well enough to give me some space for a while. Sometimes I think I'd rather they hadn't. They might have cheered me up some. Once in my room, I threw myself onto the bed and screamed into my pillow. I paced around for a few minutes and glanced out my window. There he was, standing right across the street, staring up at me. Not at my house, not even at my window, but directly at me. I ran downstairs and flung the door open and thought he was gone. For that first second, I felt a huge relief, but then I noticed that he was simply further away, standing a few houses down to my left, again standing behind a car. I was just freaked out, so I called to my parents and told them this guy was really bothering me, and I didn't even know who he was. They couldn't see him. I pointed him out. He was standing directly behind Mrs. Remington's car, and they acted like I was playing a joke. There was no one there, they said. I immediately jumped to conclusions. He was a ghost. He was a devil, an alien, I don't know. I watched a lot of X-Files as a kid. The next day I woke up dreading looking outside. As expected, he was there, on the sidewalk, across the street, in front of John and Joe's house. I mentioned him to my mom again, and it was the same as before. There's no one there. Stop playing tricks. Get ready for school. I was already into paranormal bullshit. I loved X-Files, sightings, fact or fiction, studied cryptids, all that stuff. So the idea of a strange person watching me, who nobody else could see, didn't really challenge my view of the world. I was freaked out, but I rolled with it. On my way to school, I kept looking back, and sure enough, he was always there. I never saw him move. He'd be somewhere a block or so behind me, usually partially hidden by some object, a pole or a car. He never moved except to watch me. I crossed streets while locking eyes with him, and he just tracked me the whole way. When I turned a corner, I saw nothing until I had to look forward and back again. At school with my new friend never terribly far off, I went about business as usual. Most people who'd been at the party the day before treated me as they usually did. A few asked me about what happened, Most of my friends went right back to normal. It was only Owen who stayed different. Being older, he went to a different school than I did, and we ran into each other on the way home. It seemed like things would be fine, and my new companion was quite a ways away. After a minute, Owen asked me why I'd pushed his sister, or whatever else had happened. I told him I had nothing to do with her falling. I just went inside to pee. Owen gave me a few chances to come clean, and when I didn't, he blew up. He called me a dumb little kid, said he had planned on forgiving and forgetting, but if I couldn't even cop to it, he might as well just move on. He was a teenager now, after all. As Owen turned a corner, telling me to go fuck myself, I spotted the new arrival. He was only 3 houses past the corner. Owen could have spit on him at that distance. I walked home without bothering to look behind me. I knew he'd be there. Over time, I started figuring out patterns. While I may not always see him, he's always there. Somewhere. If I look for him, I'll find him easily. His distance varies with my mood, typically. He doesn't enter buildings unless I'm really upset. But since I'm rarely in a good mood these days, he's usually pretty close to the windows. It's kind of an endless cycle. I'm upset, so he's near, which upsets me, so he winds up being even closer the next time I spot him. When I was 16, my dad passed away, and I spent a week or two waking up with him in the corner of my room. While he never really moves, besides his endless watching, he doesn't seem to mind where I go or how much I close the distance between us, so long as we're not touching. He's never really been menacing or anything, just kind of there. His expression is pleasant, friendly. I don't know what he is, what he wants, any of that, and he never speaks. But he smiles when I ask questions about those things. That's something, I guess. He often has his head cocked to the side as if studying whatever I'm doing. Apparently, I'm either really interesting or confusing or both. The one and only time he was anything but pleasantly staring was when I tried to touch him. I raised my hand to touch his shoulder, and he changed. His lips pulled back, a touch further than they should have been able to. His nostrils flared, and his eyes, they turned from brown to yellow. I did not touch him, and I never tried to again. It's been years now. I'm 26. Nothing's really changed aside from me having an apartment and a job. He's still always around, usually pretty nearby. Over the years, I've given up trying to figure things out. No internet search, no trip to the library, nothing has ever led me to anything that might explain just what he is. I've fallen out of paying attention to occult and paranormal things. I don't even know why I'm sharing this now. I've told a few people here and there, even those who shared my interest, but no one's ever believed me.